Chapter 2 of Jewels of Gwahlur by Robert Howard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2. A Goddess Awakens. The Cimmerian at first made no attempt to fight the current that was sweeping him through lightless night. He kept himself afloat, gripping between his teeth the sword which he had not relinquished even in his fall, and did not even seek to guess to what doom he was being borne. But suddenly a beam of light lanced the darkness ahead of him. He saw the surging, seething black surface of the water, in turmoil as if disturbed by some monster of the deep, and he saw the sheer stone walls of the channel curved up to a vault overhead. On each side ran a narrow ledge just below the arching roof, but they were far out of his reach. At one point this roof had been broken, probably fallen in, and the light was streaming through the aperture. Beyond that shaft of light was utter blackness, and panic assailed the Cimmerian as he saw he would be swept on past that spot of light and into the unknown blackness again. Then he saw something else. Bronze ladders extending from the ledges to the water's surface at regular intervals, and there was one just ahead of him. Instantly he struck out for it, fighting the current that would have held him in the middle of the stream. It dragged at him with tangible, animate, slimy hands, but he buffeted the rushing surge with the strength of desperation, and now drew closer and closer inshore, fighting furiously for every inch. Now he was even with the ladder, and with a fierce, gasping plunge he gripped the bottom rung and hung on, breathless. A few seconds later he struggled up out of the seething water, trusting his weight dubiously to the corroded rungs. They sagged and bent, but they held, and he clambered up onto the narrow ledge, which ran along the wall scarcely a man's length below the curving roof. The tall Cimmerian was forced to bend his head as he stood up. A heavy bronze door showed in the stone at a point even with the head of the ladder, but it did not give to Conan's efforts. He transferred his sword from his teeth to its scabbard, spitting blood, for the edge had cut his lips in that fierce fight with the river, and turned his attention to the broken roof. He could reach his arms up through the crevice and grip the edge, and careful testing told him it would bear his weight. An instant later he had drawn himself up through the hole and found himself in a wide chamber in a state of extreme disrepair. Most of the roof had fallen in, as well as a great section of the floor, which was laid over the vault of a subterranean river. Broken arches opened into other chambers and corridors, and Conan believed he was still in the great palace. He wondered uneasily how many chambers in that palace had underground water directly under them, and when the ancient flags or tiles might give way again and precipitate him back into the current from which he had just crawled. And he wondered just how much of an accident that fall had been. Had those rotten flags simply chanced to give way beneath his weight? Or was there a more sinister explanation? One thing at least was obvious. He was not the only living thing in that palace. That gong had not sounded of its own accord, whether the noise had been meant to lure him to his death or not. The silence of the palace became suddenly sinister, fraught with crawling menace. Could it be someone on the same mission as himself? A sudden thought occurred to him at the memory of the mysterious Bit Yakin. Was it possible that this man had found the teeth of Gwahlur in his long residence in Alkmeenon? That his servants had taken them with them when they departed? The possibility that he might be following a will-o'-the-wisp infuriated the Cimmerian. Choosing a corridor which he believed led back toward the part of the palace he had first entered, He hurried along it, stepping gingerly as he thought of that black river that seethed and foamed somewhere below his feet. His speculations recurrently revolved about the oracle chamber and its cryptic occupant. Somewhere in that vicinity must be the clue to the mystery of the treasure, if indeed it still remained in its immemorial hiding place. The great palace lay silent as ever, disturbed only by the swift passing of his sandaled feet. The chambers and halls he traversed were crumbling into ruin, but as he advanced, the ravages of decay became less apparent. He wondered briefly for what purpose the ladders had been suspended from the ledges over the subterranean river, but dismissed the matter with a shrug. He was little interested in speculating over unremunerative problems of antiquity. He was not sure just where the oracle chamber lay from where he was, but presently he emerged into a corridor which led back into the great throne room under one of the arches. He had reached a decision. It was useless for him to wander aimlessly about the palace seeking the hoard. He would conceal himself somewhere here, wait until the Kashani priests came, and then, after they had gone through the farce of consulting the oracle, he would follow them to the hiding place of the gems, to which he was certain they would go. Perhaps they would only take a few of the jewels with him. He would content himself with the rest. Drawn by a morbid fascination, he re-entered the oracle chamber and stared down again at the motionless figure of the princess, who was worshipped as a goddess, entranced by her frigid beauty. What cryptic secret was locked in that marvelously molded form? He started violently. The breath sucked through his teeth. The short hairs prickled at the back of his scalp. The body still lay as he had first seen it, silent, motionless, in breastplates of jeweled gold, gilded sandals, and silken skirt. But now there was a subtle difference. The lissome limbs were not rigid. A peach bloom touched the cheeks. The lips were red. With a panicky curse, Conan ripped out his sword. "Crom, she's alive!" At his words, the long, dark lashes lifted. The eyes opened and gaped up at him inscrutably, dark, lustrous, mystical. He glared in frozen speechlessness. She sat up with a supple ease, still holding his ensorcelled stare. He licked his dry lips and found voice. "You are you Yelaya?" he stammered. "I am Yelaya." The voice was rich and musical, and he stared with new wonder. "Do not fear. I will not harm you if you do my bidding." "How can a dead woman come to life after all these centuries?" he demanded, as if skeptical of what his senses told him. A curious gleam was beginning to smolder in his eyes. She lifted her arms in a mystical gesture. "I am a goddess. 1,000 years ago there descended upon me the curse of the greater gods, the gods of darkness beyond the borders of light. The mortal in me died. The goddess in me could never die. Here I have lain for so many centuries, to awaken each night at sunset, and hold my court as of yore, with specters drawn from the shadows of the past. Man, if you would not view that which will blast your soul forever, get hence quickly, I command you. Go!" The voice became imperious, and her slender arm lifted and pointed. Conan, his eyes burning slits, slowly sheathed his sword, but he did not obey her order. He stepped closer, as if impelled by a powerful fascination. Without the slightest warning, he grabbed her up in a bear-like grasp. She screamed a very ungoddess-like scream, and there was a sound of ripping silk, as with one ruthless wrench he tore off her skirt. Goddess! Ha! His bark was full of angry contempt. He ignored the frantic writhings of his captive. I thought it was strange that a princess of Alkmeenon would speak with a Corinthian accent. As soon as I'd gathered my wits, I knew I'd seen you somewhere. You're Muriela, Zargheba's Corinthian dancing girl. This crescent-shaped birthmark on your hip proves it. I saw it once when Zargheba was whipping you. Goddess! Bah! He smacked the betraying hip contemptuously and resoundingly with his open hand, and the girl yelped piteously. All her imperiousness had gone out of her. She was no longer a mystical figure of antiquity, but a terrified and humiliated dancing girl, such as can be bought at almost any Shemitish marketplace. She lifted up her voice and wept unashamedly. Her captor glared down at her with angry triumph. Goddess! Ha! So you were one of the veiled women Zargheba brought to Kashia with him. Did you think you could fool me, you little idiot? A year ago I saw you in Akbitana with that swine Zargheba, and I don't forget faces, or women's figures. I think I'll... Squirming about in his grasp, she threw her slender arms about his massive neck in an abandon of terror. Tears coursed down her cheeks, and her sobs quivered with a note of hysteria. "Oh, please don't hurt me. Don't. I had to do it. Zargheba brought me here to act as the oracle." "Why, you sacrilegious little hussy," rumbled Conan. "Do you not fear the gods? Crom, is there no honesty anywhere?" "Oh, please," she begged, quivering with abject fright. "I couldn't disobey Zargheba. Oh, what shall I do? I shall be cursed by these heathen gods." "What do you think the priests will do to you if they find out you're an impostor?" he demanded. At the thought, her legs refused to support her, and she collapsed in a shuddering heap, clasping Conan's knees and mingling incoherent pleas for mercy and protection with piteous protestations of her innocence of any malign intention. It was a vivid change from her pose as the ancient princess, but not surprising. The fear that had nerved her then was now her undoing. "Where is Zargheba?" he demanded. "Stop yammering, damn it, and answer me." "Outside the palace," she whimpered, "watching for the priests." "How many men with him?" "None. We came alone." "Ha!" It was much more like the satisfied grunt of a hunting lion. "You must have left Kashia a few hours after I did. Did you climb the cliffs?" She shook her head, too choked with tears to speak coherently. With an impatient imprecation, he seized her slim shoulders and shook her until she gasped for breath. "Will you quit that blubbering and answer me? How did you get into the valley?" "Zargheba knew the secret way," she gasped. "The priest Gwahlur told him, and Thutmekri. On the south side of the valley there is a broad pool, lying at the foot of the cliffs. There is a cave mouth under the surface of the water that is not visible to the casual glance. We ducked under the water and entered it. The cave slopes up out of the water swiftly and leads through the cliffs. The opening on the side of the valley is masked by heavy thickets." "I climbed the cliffs on the east side," he muttered. "Well, what then?" "We came to the palace, and Zargheba hid me among the trees while he went to look for the chamber of the oracle. I do not think he fully trusted Gwahlur. While he was gone, I thought I heard a gong sound, but I was not sure. Presently, Zargheba came and took me into the palace and brought me to this chamber, where the goddess Yelaya lay upon the dais. He stripped the body and clothed me in the garments and ornaments. Then he went forth to hide the body and watch for the priests. I have been afraid. When you entered, I wanted to leap up and beg you to take me away from this place, but I feared Zargheba. When you discovered I was alive, I thought I could frighten you away." "What were you to say to the oracle?" he asked. "I was to bid the priests to take the teeth of Gwahlur and give some of them to Thutmekri as a pledge, as he desired, and place the rest in the palace at Keshia. I was to tell them that an awful doom threatened Kishan if they did not agree to Thutmekri's proposals. And, oh yes, I was to tell them that you were to be skinned alive immediately." "Thutmekri wanted the treasure where he, or the Zimbabweans, could lay hand on it easily," muttered Conan, disregarding the remark concerning himself. "I'll carve his liver yet. Garulga is a party to the swindle, of course?" "No. He believes in his gods, and is incorruptible. He knows nothing about this. He will obey the oracle. It was all Thutmekri's plan. Knowing the Kishani would consult the oracle, he had Zargheba bring me with the embassy from Zimbabwe, closely veiled and secluded." "Well, I'm damned," muttered Conan. "A priest who honestly believes in his oracle and cannot be bribed? Crom! I wonder if it was Zargheba who banged that gong. Did he know I was here? Could he have known about that rotted flagging? Where is he now, girl?" "Hiding in a thicket of lotus trees, near the ancient avenue that leads from the south wall of the cliffs to the palace," she answered. Then she renewed her importunities. "Oh, Conan, have pity on me. I am afraid of this evil ancient place. I know I have heard stealthy footfalls padding about me. Oh, Conan, take me away with you. Zargheba will kill me when I have served his purpose here. I know it. The priests, too, will kill me if they discover my deceit. He is a devil. He bought me from a slave trader who stole me out of a caravan bound through southern Koth, and has made me the tool of his intrigues ever since. Take me away from him. You cannot be as cruel as he. Don't leave me to be slain here. Please, please." She was on her knees, clutching at Conan hysterically, her beautiful, tear-stained face upturned to him, her dark silken hair flowing in disorder over her white shoulders. Conan picked her up and set her on his knee. "Listen to me. I'll protect you from Zargheba. The priest shall not know of your perfidy, but you've got to do as I tell you." She faltered promises of explicit obedience, clasping his corded neck as if seeking security from the contact. "Good. When the priests come, you'll act the part of Yelaya, as Zargheba planned. It'll be dark, and in the torchlight they'll never know the difference. But you'll say this to them: 'It is the will of the gods that the Stygian and his Shemitish dogs be driven from Kishan. They are thieves and traitors who plot to rob the gods. Let the teeth of Gwahlur be placed in the care of the general Conan. Let him lead the armies of Kishan. He is beloved of the gods.'" She shivered with an expression of desperation, but acquiesced. "But Zargheba," she cried, "he'll kill me." "Don't worry about Zargheba," he grunted. "I'll take care of that dog. Do you as I say. Here, put your hair up again. It's fallen all over your shoulders, and the gem's fallen out of it." He replaced the great glowing gem himself, nodding approval. "It's worth a room full of slaves itself alone. Here, put your skirt back on. It's torn down the side, but the priests will never notice it. Wipe your face. A goddess doesn't cry like a whipped schoolgirl. By Crom, you do look like Yelaya, face, hair, figure, and all. If you act the goddess with the priests as well as you did with me, you'll fool them easily." "I'll try," she shivered. "Good. I'm going to find Zargheba." At that she became panicky again. "No, don't leave me alone. This place is haunted." "There's nothing here to harm you," he assured her impatiently. "Nothing but Zargheba, and I'm going to look after him. I'll be back shortly. I'll be watching from close by in case anything goes wrong during the ceremony. If you play your part properly, nothing will go wrong." And turning, he hastened out of the oracle chamber. Behind him, Muriela squeaked wretchedly at his going. Twilight had fallen. The great rooms and halls were shadowy and indistinct. Copper friezes glinted dully through the dusk. Conan strode like a silent phantom through the great halls, with the sensation of being stared at from the shadowed recesses by invisible ghosts of the past. No wonder the girl was nervous amid such surroundings. He glided down the marble steps like a slinking panther, sword in hand. Silence reigned over the valley, and above the rim of the cliffs stars were blinking out. If the priests of Kashia had entered the valley, there was not a sound, not a movement in the greenery to betray them. He made out the ancient, broken, paved avenue, wandering away to the south, lost amid the cluttering masses of fronds and thick-leaved bushes. He followed it warily, hugging the edge of the paving where the shrubs massed their shadows thickly, until he saw ahead of him, dimly in the dusk, the clump of lotus trees, the strange growth peculiar to the black lands of Kush. There, according to the girl, Zargheba should be lurking. Conan became stealth personified. A velvet-footed shadow, he melted into the thickets. He approached the lotus grove by a circuitous movement, and scarcely the rustle of a leaf proclaimed his passing. At the edge of the trees he halted suddenly, crouched like a suspicious panther among the deep shrubs. Ahead of him, among the dense leaves, showed a pallid oval, dim in the uncertain light. It might have been one of the great white blossoms that shone thickly among the branches. But Conan knew that it was a man's face, and it was turned toward him. He shrank quickly deeper into the shadows. Had Zargheba seen him? The man was looking directly toward him. Seconds passed. That dim face had not moved. Conan could make out the dark tuft below that was the short black beard. And suddenly Conan was aware of something unnatural. Zargheba, he knew, was not a tall man. Standing erect, his head would scarcely top the Cimmerian's shoulder, yet that face was on a level with Conan's own. Was the man standing on something? Conan bent and peered toward the ground below the spot where the face showed, but his vision was blocked by undergrowth and the thick boles of the trees. But he saw something else, and he stiffened. Through a slot in the underbrush, he glimpsed the stem of the tree under which, apparently, Zargheba was standing. The face was directly in line with that tree. He should have seen below that face not the tree trunk, but Zargheba's body. But there was no body there. Suddenly tenser than a tiger who stalks his prey, Conan glided deeper into the thicket, and a moment later drew aside a leafy branch and glared at the face that had not moved, nor would it ever move again of its own volition. He looked at Zargheba's severed head, suspended from the branch of the tree by its own long black hair. End of chapter 2.